Hello and welcome to lesson number 7 in the Python tutorial series. I'm Steve, and we're going to go ahead and get started this week talking about comparisons and Boolean operators. To me, this is a very important topic, and not just this lesson, but probably the next 3, 7, 8, and 9, when we talk about comparisons, Booleans, while statements, and if statements. These are really important concepts to understand if you want to write interesting programs. Now, thus far, what we've learned isn't necessarily unimportant. Print statements, input statements, assigning variables, those are all components that go into just about every program you're going to write. But they're not that difficult to pick up on, and by themselves, you can't write terribly interesting programs. With the comparison operators, assignment operators, while statements, if statements, you'll be able to write some interesting programs, some interesting games. And even though they may only be text-based, this is going to be the first time where you're going to be able to put your own personal flair into your games and make them really interesting and make them stand out from what other people are doing. Now, I don't think it's just going to be this lesson right here that fits that mold. This lesson, lesson 7, 8, which will be on while statements, and lesson 9, which is going to be on the if statement, those three put together are very powerful programming concepts. It's with those statements that you can take those simple text prints and those simple input statements and make a fun and interesting game. Even if at this point it's not graphical, it's still going to be something that is uniquely yours. And I haven't talked a whole lot about this, but this is the point in programming, at least for me, where you start to get sold on your programs, you start to get engrossed in your programs, and you start to think about, well, what can I do to make it better? And you start adding features, and you start adding some neat stuff to it. So I'm really excited to get through 7, 8, and 9 and move forward. Now, today's lesson, we're not going to have a challenge program. Most of what we're going to do today is going to be in the Python shell, just to get the comparison operator, assignment operator, logical operators, those three things, to get those defined and see what they are. And then in lessons 8 and 9, we'll apply them to programs, and we'll be writing some pretty neat programs. Coming up soon will be the first project in the Python tutorial series, and I think in maybe 3 or 4 lessons, we should be writing our first full program, our first full game, which is going to be a Guess the Number game. So without any further ado, let's get started looking at comparisons and Boolean operators. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is define the first term, assignment operator. This is a very simple term. I think it's something that most people will pick on really quick, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. An assignment operator is a symbol in Python that assigns a new value to a variable, or I guess that's the best way to put it. It assigns a value to a variable. So if I wrote a very simple statement, x equals 4, the assignment operator is the equal sign right here, and that statement right there, if you use the word assignment and it says, I want to assign a value of 4 to x. So x is the assignment operator, and it just assigns the value of something to another thing. If I said I want the value z to equal 5 plus 5, Python is first going to evaluate my statement, 5 plus 5. It's going to set that equal to a value of 10. And then using the assignment operator, what we're saying is we want this value right here to be assigned to z. This is stuff that you've been doing in your programs before. It's just you haven't had a vocabulary word necessarily to define what you're doing. But there's some other assignment operators that we haven't looked at yet that make programming pretty simple. The first one is plus equals. To explain plus equals, the easiest way to do it is, let's pull up the value of x. We type x, we know x equals 4. Well, let's say we want to increment x by 1. I could type x equals x plus 1. What that's going to do is it's going to take the current value of x, which is 4. It's going to add 1, making this evaluate to a value of 5, and then using the assignment operator, we're going to take the value of 5 and assign it to x. And indeed, when we press x, x equals 5. And I can do that again, x equals x plus 1, and x equals 6, and x equals x plus 1, and x equals 7. Another assignment operator we can use that's going to shorten that a little bit is plus equals. It is the exact same thing to type x plus equals 1. Plus equals tells Python that the value of x should be incremented by 1. Simply add a value of 1 to x. X plus equals 1, x equals 8. If I said x plus equals 10, we're just taking the value x, adding 10, and reassigning it to the value of x. So x equals 18. There's the subtraction equivalent of that. If I said x minus equals 8, x is going to be a value of 10. So this minus equal sign right here is the assignment operator. It's the equivalent of typing x equals x minus 3, which equals 7. So it's just a quicker way to do some mathematical calculations. I said very simple stuff. And all of your mathematical operators can be, what's the word I'm looking at? It can be combined with the assignment operator equals to quickly revalue variables that are in use. If I set z to a value of 5, and I say z times equals 3, that's the equivalent of taking 5 times 3 and reassigning it to z. So z equals 15. I can take z, the division equals, that's z divided by 5, reassigned to a value of z. Now remember, back to our very first or second lesson, that that's always going to create a float value. If I want to do, I'm going to reset my, my value of z to 15. I can do the exact same division. Z integer division equals 5. That's z integer division by 5, which is going to set z to a value of 3. I can use raised to the power of. So if I have, say, x, we're going to set x equal to 2, and I want x raised to the power of 4. X is going to equal 16. So assignment operators, very simply, I don't think we have to spend any more time on this because it should be fairly self-explanatory. Assignment operators, really it's the equal sign, setting a variable equal to something else, but the plus equals, minus equals, those are very useful assignment operators to know. Plus equals, minus equals, in particular when you're trying to keep count of something, and if you want to increment a number by 1, or you want to increment the number by just a certain value every time an event happens in your program, keep those assignment operators in mind. Now, more important than the assignment operators, which I think you'll pick up on pretty quick, actually I think everyone will pick up on all this stuff pretty quick, comparison operators, very similar, except comparison operators, rather than assign a value to a variable, a comparison operator is going to compare two values to one another. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen here and talk about comparison operators. Before we talk about comparison operators, you have to know what the term Boolean means. It's an important programming term. It comes up in a lot of books, and when I was first learning programming, Boolean was a word that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It seemed weird, and I didn't understand what it meant, but it's really simple and a powerful concept as well. And a Boolean value, really simply, is just an expression that evaluates to either true or false. It's either one thing or another. And so Python will come back and tell us if an expression is true or false. That's what a Boolean value is. It's nothing more than that, a question that is either answered with a true or false response. So up here in my Python shell, I'm going to assign a value. I'm going to take a variable x and set it equal to 1. I know now that x is equal to a value of 1. Using a comparison operator, I can ask Python to check to see if one value is equal to another. I'd say x with two equal signs is very different than the assignment operator. The two equal signs put together are a comparison operator, and that would be read as is x equal to 1. And when I evaluate that statement, I see that evaluates to a value of true. If I say is x equal to 5, of course, that's false, and that evaluates to false. Python comes back and says that's not true. If I set another value, let's take a variable z, and I'm going to set that equal to a value of 16, I can ask Python to compare two variables together. Is x equal to z? No, it's not, because x equals 1, z equals 16, and 1 is not equal to 16. So the first comparison operator, and a very common comparison operator, is the equal to. Is equal to. Another one that comes up an awful lot is not equal to. We want to check and see if two values are not equal to one another, and that's written with an exclamation point and an equal sign. I might want to ask, is the value of 3 not equal to a value of 4? Is 3 not equal to 4? Of course, that's true. Is 5 not equal to 5? False. 5 is equal to 5, so that evaluates to false. So exclamation point equals will just give you the opposite of what equals equals will evaluate to. So comparison operator is just going to check the value of two things to one another and tell you whether it's true or false. Much like you probably learned in your early math classes, like, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or maybe earlier than that, you can check to see if something's greater than or less than as well. I might say something like, is 4 greater than 6? It's not. That evaluates to false. I might ask, is 13 less than 19? That evaluates to true. I can also do less than or equal to. Is 14 less than or equal to 14? That evaluates to true, because it's not less than 14, but it is equal to, so that's going to return a true value. Is 17 greater than or equal to 22? That evaluates to false. So I can do this with numbers, I can do this with variables, and I can do this with strings as well. So I'm going to set a variable name equal to Steve. I'll set a location variable equal to Arizona. And I might ask, name equals Steve. Is name equal to Steve? Python replies or returns a value of true. I'm going to ask, is location equal to Florida? Python's going to return a value of false for that. Location is currently set to Arizona, not Florida, so location is not equal to Florida. I can ask things like, is abacus? Oh, I don't know how to spell abacus. I should have probably picked a different word. I was just trying to think of something that started with an A. Is abacus greater than apple? That returns false. We can compare strings together. That's something that Python is completely able to do. But when it evaluates greater than or less than, when it's comparing strings, it's doing so alphabetically. So since abacus comes before apple alphabetically, that's going to evaluate to a false response. Whereas if I might ask, is school less than zebra? I'm going to get a response of true because alphabetically school comes before zebra. Now, those greater than and less than, when it comes to strings, I don't use that a whole lot in programs. For strings, I often check to see if it's equal to or not equal to something, but it is worth noting that you can do comparison operators not only on numbers, but also on strings. Okay, so this video is already starting to approach the 15-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and break this into two different videos. In Lesson 7, I still want to talk about logical operations, which are statements like or, and, not, and how they relate to programming. So I'm going to split it into like Lesson 7.2 so we can go over those separately. I know that this particular lesson, Lesson 7, what we just went over is really simple, and it might seem kind of mundane, but I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page when we move into some of the more advanced lessons, because this really is the foundation of writing some cool programs. I know it might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but just stick with me because we are going to get to some neater programs here real shortly. So I'm going to cut this video off here. I want to say thank you everybody for watching. We're going to do a short video with 7.2 to look at logical operations and move into while statements and if statements in lessons 8 and 9. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. If you have any questions, you have any comments, go ahead and leave them. I will definitely respond to them. If you need any help with programs that you're writing or trying to put together, I'll be happy to help you with those. Until then, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.